here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the guitarist, writer, singer. It's the one and only Harry Dingman III, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Has been in various bands, including Cartoon Pupils, but is mostly famous for another band from Nebraska titled For Against, and also The Millions as well. So you're going to find out all about Harry and his musical career in this fascinating interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Harry, it's over to you.
So I was really into Johnny Cash, and my parents liked country music, and so I saw Johnny Cash play live a few times. There's a couple San Quentin, live at San Quentin, and then Folsom Prison, and so those albums were really, I don't know, they just sent goosebumps up my, it just made me feel something when I listened to those. And I like the style of that music and Johnny's voice. And I was kind of obsessed with Johnny Cash for a while. So,
well, absolutely. My parents had a little bit of that country, but that was the sort of country that was Boxcar Willie and Jim Reeves and those sort of artists, which I must admit I found quite tricky. Later on, I started to discover other country artists, but yes, it was definitely, it wasn't they weren't the great albums for me, but
Right. Well, Boxcar Willie may have been from Nebraska, because I remember being at a garage sale once, and they had a guitar there, and they said, "Oh, well, that's from Boxcar Willie's guitarist," and he's, they're from Nebraska. I don't really know too much about Boxcar Willie, so
no,
but
absolutely.
Johnny Cash. And then we listened to, I went and saw John Denver. He played around here, and that's more kind of singing with acoustic guitar, more pop on the radio. And I was also born in 1964, February 19th. So we kind of were around doing the same thing. I know I liked the Beatles a lot. I had the White Album back then, and listen to the radio, all the AM radio, all the pop hits on there. So it was just kind of fun. And I found bands to be a real mystery. I didn't understand how the guitars worked or the amplifiers, and like the whole look of everything. So.
Yes, absolutely. And did you have any older brothers or sisters that gave you some musical moments that influenced you at all?
No. I had a younger brother, and he was into music too. But there were a lot of kids in my neighborhood where I grew up. They're on a block. There were probably about 70 kids, and a lot of those older kids would have parties or whatever, and then we would sneak in, and they'd have the parents' console stereo cranked to 11, and then they would be listening to something like Boston or something like that. So that's the kind of the first time I knew of David Bowie. I think he was on Sesame Street, a kids show. And so in grade school, someone turned me on to David Bowie, and I listened to some of his songs and liked it. I remember on TV there would be like rock concert type shows at night, and I remember seeing David Bowie, and he had these shoes that kind of made him wobble back and forth. They were like platforms, but they were round on the bottom. And then I was like, man, I can't understand this guy. I can't figure him out, but it was really intriguing. And that's when I realized, I like things that are kind of uncomfortable and make you think differently, and getting into music. I really got into the band Kiss for a while. I was listening to the Beach Boys and the Beatles, but I wanted something heavier. And then Kiss came around, and there was an album called like Kiss Alive 2 that we listened to over and over. We knew all the album tracks, and my friends and I would just sit and listen to these records, and then discovered Led Zeppelin, kind of heavy, but all that music didn't really resonate with me a whole lot until about like 1977, 78. One of my friends, his dad owned a pizza restaurant, and there was a band called the Sex Pistols. They had like God Save the Queen on a little 7-inch 45 in the jukebox. And we played that, and I was like, that's great. And then I think my friend's dad heard that song and said, "Oh, we got to get that out of the jukebox." And he's like, "You can just have the record." So that was my first, exposure to the Sex Pistols. And then I think they were on tour, and they got in trouble in Texas. I saw that on the news. I went to the local record shop by my house, and they had one copy of Nevermind the Bollocks, and they're like, "We're glad somebody's going to buy that. It's been sitting here for a while." So.
God, that's quite I was going to say that was quite intriguing. Yes. So yes. So was there a kind of quite a vibrant music scene happening in Lincoln, Nebraska?
The vibrant music scene was all about cover bands. It was if you could play Stairway to Heaven and make it sound somewhat like Led Zeppelin, or play REO Speedwagon, Riding the Storm Out, everybody judged the musicians on how well they could play covers. So there were lots of cover bands, some of which I went and saw and really liked, and just had fun, but nobody really wrote original music. It was all about playing covers. And I guess that's how people judged music, if you could sound like someone else. So a lot of the musicians just aspired to not create but just copy other bands. And then with punk, I went and saw the Ramones. I was probably in junior high school, and they played in Omaha. And I remember a cover band opened for them, but they were like a rock band that played. They decided they would be new wave. So they played some B-52s, maybe some Go-Go's. They basically got booed off the stage. People threw things at them. I think the guitar player had an old Stratocaster. Well, someone threw a beer, hit the 1962 Stratocaster, and then the band left the stage. But then the Ramones came on, and they played like, these power chords or bar chords. They had this look, this sound. The audience totally went crazy. It was like my first like punk rock show, or whatever you want to call it, but just a different style of music. It was just a whole different, and I was like, this is more interesting than any of these cover bands I've been seeing. And it just kind of changed everything for me. It was so loud at one point I had to leave and then stand outside for a while, then go back in.
Yes, absolutely. Did you also have albums in that collection of like Pete Frampton Comes Live? That was always a classic, and Band on the Run.
Yeah, that was I remember seeing that album cover and just going, "What is this?" And seeing that image. I didn't really like the music too much, but I thought the album cover looked cool. Everybody had that. That was a double album. And it was funny, one of my bands was touring another band called The Millions. We were in Lawrence, Kansas. And Greg, our drummer, who also drummed for Four Against, said, the sound man looks a lot like the bass player of Peter Frampton's band. So we asked him, and he said, "Yeah, that was me on Peter Frampton's Comes Alive. I was the bass player. Now I run sound."
Right. My God, did you get his autograph? I don't know. I mean,
no. Did you like that album? Did you have that album?
Well, I had an older brother who was 7 years older than me, and so his record collection consisted of a lot of prog rock, yes, yes, Genesis, Wishbone Ash, Barclay James Harvest, but he had a few others. He had Goodbye Yellow Brick Road stuck in there. He had Sgt. Pepper by the Beatles and Frampton Comes Live. But there was also Deep Purple and Black Sabbath. So that was kind of the record collection. And I'd sneak into his room and play these records, because obviously one was forbidden to do that. But the curiosity of these kind of gatefold sleeves and Roger Dean, and just hearing Fireball by Deep Purple, or Paranoid by Black Sabbath, which at the time this was like the mid-70s, so there was no cultural references. The same with Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. I mean, that had only just really come out, and it was like, well, that's Elton and the Beatles. It's kind of weird, because you think the Beatles had only just broken up during that period as well, and there we were, sort of.
Right. It seemed like Yeah, it seemed like the Beatles had been gone a long time, but actually they hadn't. And I think my first record I ever bought was Yellow Brick Road. I remember, with my own money walking to the record store by myself, knowing about Elton John. And I was intrigued with that album cover. I drew all those pictures in there, copied them, used colored pencil, put some of that on my bedroom wall. And my dad really liked Elton John. My parents thought he sounded great. And then I think in about 1979 or 80, he came to Lincoln, and I finally got to see him play, which was pretty cool too. It was mostly the original band at that time. So,
Oh my God, yes, I do remember there was another great song he did, Philadelphia Freedom, wasn't there, which was a classic. I think it was
oh,
a, I think it was
yeah,
about.
yeah, all his albums.
Yes, and yeah, it was a rich period. His 80s work was a little bit, it was commercial, but not quite as stunning as his
Right,
70s
right,
was.
right. Yeah.
But you can't. I think a lot of
But I
that
really
actually,
like some.
yes. Well, I realise with a lot of artists, they can have one decade where they're on that musical zeitgeist, but then the following decade, it kind of, they can get lost. And a lot of those artists from the 70s, their 80s work isn't that brilliant. You think, yeah, that wasn't quite there. Like I think of David Bowie or Rod Stewart and, Elton John, yeah, it was kind of, they
Yeah,
got a bit lost in the production sound and the, and the mullet. Often they all went and sort of got a
or
mullet.
maybe Right, or maybe the videos that they were making for MTV. There were a lot of video type bands and stuff like that. I didn't really like Elton John in the '80s either, or a lot of those artists. So the '70s was kind of an interesting time because a lot happened. So
It did a lot happen. But I mean, MTV, there was a lot of criticism, but it was also the reason that most of those yacht rock bands finished because suddenly people got to see them and sort of realized they were a bit chunky chaps with big hairy moustaches, didn't they? And lots of hair. And they just weren't good for
right,
video, were they? They looked like old men singing about
no,
love. And
right, right.
if you
That's a
want,
good point.
yes,
That's
Chicago. Chicago was a band that
right.
suffered. Toto didn't really, they didn't have the chops for MTV, did they?
No, no, not at all. And I remember seeing like, oh, maybe it was I was in, I think it was my senior year in high school. I was pretty sick. I had mono, and I just sat around and I watched MTV. Well, late at night, I saw Echo and the Bunnymen, the Cutter video for the first time, and I saw Simple Minds doing someone somewhere in summertime live. I mean, they had all these cool videos. And then those that MTV at that time really started to influence me. Of course, Flock of Seagulls were really popular. The Go-Go's had some hits. We could go on. I think even like Wall of Voodoo. We could go on and on
Yes,
about
well,
all those
absolutely. And
bands. it
then
was it
and
was a pretty
it was very good.
cool time.
It was a very pop time. So when you got to the age of 16, which was 1980, I know I'm doing the maths here. Did you leave school at that stage, or
Yeah.
do you left school, or did you keep on at college at 16?
No. Yeah, I was probably 17 or 18 when I went to college, and my mom worked at a university, so my tuition was paid for. So it was like free school. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but my parents said, "Well, we've got this opportunity. You've got to just take it." And I started out in psychology, but realized I really liked art, and so I really got into abstract painting and doing graphic art. And at that time, then I was also learning how to play guitar. So I thought maybe this would be a good time to put out a record. So that kind of led to, the first Autocrat It's a Lie record by Four Against, the 7-inch. We put that out ourselves. So.
Right. So that was it. So yeah. So when did the guitar appear in your life? When was the first time? And was it the bass, or was it a sort of normal acoustic guitar, or even electric?
The acoustic guitar, we had one. My parents bought me one at an early age because they realized how enthusiastic I was about music. And they even got me some lessons, but it really didn't sink in. And then I remember going to a department store. I heard about bass guitars and really didn't understand them. And this department store had one really cheap. And my mom said, okay, you can buy the bass guitar or you can buy Hotel California by the Eagles. Well, I chose the bass guitar. They're
Right.
about the same price. And we're walking out of the store, and the salesperson is like, well, you're going to need an amplifier. I'm like, what? So I didn't really understand, but I got that bass, and it sat in the closet for a long time. We'd occasionally get it out and play it, but it was more like at the last year of high school and then in college when I really got into playing bass, first in bands, in cover bands. We did, songs by The Clash or Richard Hell and the Voidoids, 999, things like that, Buzzcocks, and I played bass. And then a friend of mine had a guitar, and I bought his guitar and realized I liked the guitar because it just seemed to fit more of what I was about. The bass, you had to be very consistent and on time, and my timing wasn't that good, so I could be more expressive with the guitar. So and started to teach myself. I remember hearing, Unknown Pleasures. I had Ideal for Living by Joy Division. I really liked that. Atmosphere and She's Lost Control, 12-inch. And then somebody sold me Unknown Pleasures, and at first I didn't like the sound, but I remember listening to Shadow play, and I had my guitar out, and I happened to hit all the right notes to the solo, and I'm like, oh, maybe I can just figure this stuff out myself. And figured out Shadow play, and then went on to figure out all those early Joy Division songs and play along. So
Right, they were the
because I
basis.
loved you know Bernard's, I don't know how you pronounce his name, playing so much. I just felt it was really heartfelt, yet simple, direct. I don't know. He's probably one of my favorite guitar players. And I don't really like to think of guitar players as the whole sound or whole package. It was great. And but since I was playing guitar, it was an easy way for me to learn guitars by learning the songs on Unknown Pleasures.
Well, God, that's a good one. And then sort of, because you mentioned punk, and then there was the post-punk period, and then sort of around 83, the band, there was a sort of bit of an indie scene, wasn't there? The world, basically the Smiths appeared, didn't they, in our lives? And then for 5 years when they
Right.
existed, they were something of a sort of a soundtrack for that world, and they were always on the front of the New Musical Express or NME, and there was suddenly
Right.
a lot of jingly jangly bands appearing at that time, like Mighty Mighty and the June Brides and the Brilliant Corners, sort of classic, the Flatmates, the Primitives, Darling Buds. They suddenly felt this kind of wave in that sort of 83 to 87 of some classic indie pop. Did that sort of also come on your radar at this stage?
The Smiths did. I remember being at a party and seeing like their first 7-inch, and I thought the cover was interesting. I listened to it and I was like, wait a minute, this sounds more like 50s music or something. This isn't quite what I thought it would be. And I remember having their first album and not totally liking it, but I bought all their albums and most of their singles, and it wasn't exactly my thing. I liked the heavier sounding bands better, but as I grew older, I had more appreciation for the Smiths. I think in here in Lincoln, Nebraska, we had a local chicken restaurant that had a lot of 80s um, punk bands play, everything from like Black Flag, LA hardcore, that Circle Jerks, and things like that. But also, we had more avant garde type of Snake Finger, a lot of Ralph Records bands played the drumstick. But REM was kind of the jangly band that I think of as the indie rock for America. You think of the Smiths, but I think of REM. So, we went and saw REM at the Drumstick, and they blew everybody away. And then they were invited to a party. They all showed up at the party, so we're hanging out with REM, which was kind of cool.
Well, I would imagine actually. So, did the band, your first band, well, not your first band, but was there a few incarnations of various musical sort of lineups before you stuck with Four Against?
Yeah, there was a band in high school called the Cartoon Pupils, and that band, we played kind of the LA hardcore punk. We tried that, and then I know we learned some songs off of Unknown Pleasures. We played a talent show at the East High Snap Traps talent show, and the vice principal said, "I never want to see you guys here again." I didn't like that style of music, and we had like two singers. One was dancing a lot when we were playing, and then ran out into the audience, started to jump over people. The other one proceeded to smash black lights that we had on the stage. So it was kind of fun. We were into, I guess, just messing around and not sure where we're going with the music. But the Cartoon Pupils were a fun band, and through that band, then we formed a band called D.B.L. Well, it was first called Glue, and then it was the drummer of Four Against, Greg Hill, and Jon Fynbu and Liz Panarelli. That was Glue. Then we were D.B.L. Then we added Jeff Runnings, and we changed our name to eventually to Four Against One. And Jeff played keyboards and sang backups. John was singing, Liz on bass. And then Liz quit first. The Four Against One, she was the one. She didn't really get along with us too well as far as musical type things, but also personality wise. And then from there, John left, and I'm not really sure why. And then Jeff was like, "Well, I'll play bass and I'll sing." And we had this meeting, and we were basically like, "We don't know what this is going to be like, but we, won't continue in this band if we're not very good. So let's just see what happens." And then we started to write songs, and I would write a lot of songs on guitar or write lyrics, give them to Jeff. He would write a lot of songs on guitar and bass, and we would share parts. Most of the songs that we originally did, there was a 14-song cassette that we put out locally. And those songs were either written, I would take the lead on a song, or Jeff would. And then that is interesting that the 14-song cassette is going to come out, I believe, in an album soon. So there's actually a Four Against album that's never been released. It was before Echelons or before our single. And we recorded that with our sound man, Randy Watson, on 4-track. So we're working on mixing that now. So hopefully soon those songs will see the light of day. But that was the beginning of Four Against, just trying different ideas. And I think when people hear that, they'll hear that we were influenced by a lot of that jangle pop, the Smiths or REM. You can hear that influence in our playing, and yet maybe like the darker post-punk bands at the same time. So
Yes, my God, that's quite a lot actually. And who had the master cassettes or who had the masters for that first kind of
yeah,
release?
I had the master 4-track cassettes that have the individual tracks on them, and then I sent them to Words on Music, a label that we work with out of Minneapolis, and then they bought the original 4-track recording machine that they found an exact copy, and then recently rebuilt part of it so it would work, because some of the parts, motors or rubber parts get old, and then they transferred all those initial tracks to digital, so then they could work with them and use modern technology, EQ and noise reduction to help out the sound of those recordings.
Fantastic. And were you a three-piece on that at that point in the career? Was that a three-piece band?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that was Jeff on bass and vocals, myself on guitar, and then sometimes Jeff and I would trade around. Like I would do something on bass, or he would do something on guitar, or we'd show each other parts. And then Greg played drums, and sometimes would help out on keyboards or drum machine or something like that. So it's just the three of us with our sound man. Randy Watson saw us play a show and said, "You guys are really good. I want to record you." So we literally recorded that in his living room. The guitar amp was set up in the fireplace. The bass amp was maybe in the bathroom, and then the drums were in his bedroom, and then it was just kind of like a home recording. But I think the sound and kind of the inspiration or energy is good on that. So
yes, and once that came out, did you then get some interest from record labels at this point of signing you?
Well, we sent that around, and we got radio stations like in Phoenix, Arizona. They all gravitated towards the song Amen Eve. And that was a part of that original 14 songs. And then I don't remember, we sent it to like 4AD, we sent it to Factory. We never heard anything back. And it wasn't until we recorded our 7-inch, It's a Lie and Autocrat, and we sent that around. We heard back from IPR, Independent Project Records, out of Los Angeles. And we heard from Perry Farrell of a band called Psycom. He later went on to be in Jane's Addiction. And Psycom wanted to go on tour with us, and we actually had a tour set up, but it never happened. Their band broke up, and Perry Farrell called one day and said, crying, saying the band's gone, there's going to be no tour. So that was kind of our first, interest from people were from Los Angeles. And then we tried, Homestead was a record label. I think they had Sonic Youth, and there was a guy named Gerard, I can't say his name, Gerard Cosloy, and he took, maybe like 150 singles and was going to distribute those for us. But there was never talk of like, oh, we're going to sign you guys. So.
Right. Yes, tricky actually. Did you used to play live much as well? Did you start touring around the place, or was it mostly sort of within Lincoln?
Yeah, we did play in Lincoln as much as we could. There was a really great music scene, an underground scene, kind of a reaction to those cover bands, where people would rent out like abandoned buildings or party rooms where you could pay a fee, and then pretty much anything would happen. And we had like a bunch of our friends would go to those shows, and people from school. So that was really fun. And sometimes if we couldn't find a place to play, we'd just like play in my parents' garage. So I think that was the first official Four Against show, was in my parents' garage.
Right, my God.
And of course, we're in there with our big amps and playing super loud. And I think we got a keg of beer and had a party at the same time. And a lot of people came, and it was really fun. And then I believe we got a call from Savage Republic, Bruce Leisher at Independent Project Records, saying, "Hey, would you guys meet us in Kansas City and do a small tour with us?" So that's when we started to play out more. Played in Omaha a few times with a band called Digital Sex. We played at the Drumstick, that chicken restaurant, with Let's Active, 10,000 Maniacs. I'm trying to think, the DBs, Lords of the New Church. So different bands, that were coming through as an opening act. And we played at the university with Gene Loves Jezebel, met those guys. And so yeah, we were actively playing. We're all in school, going to college at that time, but in the summer trying to play as much as we can.
Yes, absolutely. And then sort of you got sort of signed to this record label, Independent Project. Then did you start working on this sort of I suppose it was almost the debut album, Echelon, wasn't it, at this point?
Yes, that's right.
And
Yeah,
so
we decided that we wanted. Go ahead.
Oh no, I said, what studio did you use for that particular recording?
Um, it was a studio called Studio Q, and it was downtown, and they had an 8-track machine. I think it had pretty thick tape, and we thought we would get a better sound than the 4-track. So our first single, It's a Lie, and Autocrat were recorded there ourselves. And then I believe, now that I think about it, it was actually a 16-track machine, but you could pay for 8-track and get a good deal. So then that people liked that 7-inch, and we were getting interest from people. So I said, let's record an album and use the 16 track. So it was the like the 2-inch tape maybe, or something like that, a big machine. And you know, with a board and different rooms and things like that. For Echelons, when we recorded there, we were originally isolated in rooms, you know, just in a room with this space,
Oh, you just started to
in a
break up.
room with drums, look through glass that said, you know, what?
Oh, you just broke up a little bit there. The reception just went at that point, just that last.
Oh, shoot.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm.
So we're isolated in these rooms, and that's how we recorded the initial 7-inch. But then later, we met this guy at this music store. He was a repairman. He said, "I know a lot about recording. Could I help you guys?" And so with Echelons, what we did differently, we all set up in the same room. So he said, you know, a lot of reggae bands record in the same room and let the guitar amp bleed into the drums. You'll get a better sound. And so that's what we did on Echelons. We were in the same room, so it was more like a live performance on the initial tracks of the songs.
Yes, and it's got a nice. I mean, you've got a lovely, I don't know, sonic feel to your work, isn't it? It's very atmospheric. Were you really pleased with the sort of when you heard it back at this point? Were you pleased with the results?
You know, you always have high expectations for things, and so I'm always kind of looking for ways to do it better. Some of the songs, like the song Echelons itself, I liked the sound. I felt like I was achieving that kind of machine sound that I wanted my guitar to sound. That took a lot of work, meaning that we were not close miking the guitars. I did a basic track, and then I went back over, and you know, we put different mics in the room so it just pick up the sound of the room. The rooms were pretty big there, and you know, maybe even there was like a mic in the hallway that had a cool echo to it. So yes, we were trying to get that kind of atmospheric sound going.
Amazing. So when the album came out, did you do another sort of small tour around the sort of area and elsewhere? Did they get much kind of critical
Yeah.
reviews and interest around America at this point?
We played like Minneapolis, we played Chicago. Everybody seemed to like us, and the booking agent said, "Hey, you know, we've got really good reviews. Would you do a tour?" And we did. We did like our own headlining tour, and we went to the East Coast, and that was kind of the shows. People knew who we were. Other times we were playing for like the bartender.
Right. Okay. Yes. Did you play? Did you go to New York and play places like CBGB's and venues like that?
Yes. Yeah. We did, and that was a great venue. That sounded really good. The sound person really did a great job, and we had writers from different magazines there. The show wasn't really well attended. I mean, there were a few people, but there were some key people that wrote about us and really liked the band, like Jack Rabid, and there was a band called Live Skull that came to the show. So that was really cool.
Yes. And then from that, you obviously were you still studying at this point? Because you bring a second album out almost within a year. So you're sort of having to sort of work quite quickly at this point because the next album's called December, isn't it?
That's correct. And that was recorded the next summer tour. We had just come off the Echelons tour, and Randy, our sound man, wanted to do something different. He's like, let's not go into a studio. And we found this. It was an apartment that at one time was a bomb shelter for like a place that maybe had been an insane asylum. So some of our friends were living in this bomb shelter, made it into an apartment, and they said, well, we think it looks like someone had made this into a recording studio. There's like a control room at one time, maybe in the 70s or something. There was foam on all the walls. There was a long shaft that went to the main house. And we decided that we would buy an 8-track reel machine and record there as something different. So that's where December was recorded at this bomb shelter.
My God, how did you manage to get the acoustics correct? I mean, did it take long to get the sort of the sound that you wanted?
That album was different because it just has a different feel and a different sound. I think we were kind of at the top of our game, meaning that we had toured and played a lot live, so we just kind of knew what to do. We also weren't really getting along as a band, so I don't really think we really cared about the sound so much. I mean, we did on one level, we wanted it to sound good, but I remember thinking, oh, we have a contract with IPR, we've got to make this album. Let's just make it as fast as possible, not think about it too much, and just get it done. And some really totally invested, then you can move quick and maybe just not overthink things. And that's kind of, I think, why December sounds the way it does. I know we did the basic tracks with Jeff, and then we never saw him after the basic tracks were done. I did all my dubs with Greg Hill and Randy Watson, and that was about it. And then when those Randy and Greg mixed the album, the record company didn't like the mix, and so they had Dino Paredes, who was the first bass player of Jane's Addiction and in Psycom. He mixed it, and we all liked that mix. And then we met with Jeff when we got our records and CDs, and that's about it. That was the end of the band at that point.
Right. So it was quite yes. There was the writing was on the wall then at that point, and you you all walked your separate ways.
And we had a lot of other songs that we had done a live recording of in that same Studio Q. It was a 2-track live recording. I don't know, maybe 12 other songs that were never released. I thought they were good songs, but at that point we just weren't getting along. We didn't want to do it anymore. We were offered a European tour with Savage Republic, and Greg really didn't want to work on that and do that tour. I was kind of hoping we could pull it together, and I think Jeff was too, but it just didn't work out. So yeah, we did go our separate ways. I was not sure what to do, so Jeff and I played a couple months together in a different band called Stall Version, and eventually I stopped doing that, and then I started a band called The Millions with another local musician, and then Greg, the drummer of Four Against, joined that band, and then we were a band for about 6 years. So
The Millions came out, actually. Yes. Was that quite a strange? I mean, you were still sort of relatively young. You were in your early 20s. Did that feel like an emotional wrench leaving Four Against and starting?
Oh yeah. I think what was hard about that is we invested a lot of time. We really cared about the band. We tried to write and play songs that were representative of what we were living through in Lincoln, Nebraska and doing, and then to have it all just quickly go away was kind of a letdown. Yes, for sure. And at the same time, things change and you just move on. So that's what we did with the Millions. And then Jeff, we were kind of surprised because we were out. The Millions were out in Los Angeles and talking to Dino Paredes. He had a label out there. We were talking to Geffen Records at the time, and they were like, well, why don't you guys take over the name Four Against? And we were like, but it's not the same band. And they said, well, if you don't do it, Jeff's going to do it. And so I guess, then Jeff went on to form a new band, but call it For Against. And Greg and I didn't really care. It was just something that happened. So.
Yes, God. Well, it's tricky business. I mean, yes, it's a well-known story, isn't it? Really, ownership of the band can be,
Right.
or the label. So with the Millions, then your new adventure with Greg, you also you've got a different lead singer here, Laura.
And Lori Allison, yep. And she was a friend of Marty's, the bass player. And we had played with Marty and Lori's band called the New Brass Guns. They had opened for us. And we liked her singing a lot. So I started to jam with Marty. And then I was like, do you think we could get Lori to sing with us? And he was like, sure. So she came over, and the first things we had written, she was like, I can't sing to that. And then we wrote songs that we thought she could sing to, and then it all worked.
Blimey, that did come together quite well. And then at that stage, I mean, sort of music was changing quite a lot, wasn't there?
Oh, it was.
I mean, there was the sort of in the UK, you know, like obviously the Smiths break up, 87. It was a JFK moment. Where were you when you heard the news? And then, you know, there was the dance scene. There was a bit of shoegazing. Then we had the Seattle grunge scene as well, and dance music coming in. So how did you sort of navigate the Millions and sort of your next direction?
Yeah, we didn't really, know how to navigate that. That's a great question, because we didn't know much about the grunge scene. And when Nirvana hit, that's exactly when our album came out, and we weren't grunge, so our album did not have that sound. And Nirvana had played a small club in Lincoln called Duffy's. A lot of my friends loved them. I didn't go and see them till later on the In Utero tour, when they were about the end of the line. And so all the record companies, all the industry wanted to kind of find the next Nirvana or grunge band. So, and the Millions just weren't grunge. So we just did the best we could. We played live, we toured a lot, we put out albums, we toured with Sheryl Crow over in Europe, and had a good time. And then that band kind of, things just go in cycles. That was kind of at the end of the line for
But you did two albums. You did one on Smash Records and one on Polydor, didn't you? M is for Millions.
Yes.
Were you pleased with that album?
No.
Because you had a big name producer, didn't you? The Canadian producer Terry Brown.
Yeah, Terry Brown, super nice guy. He had great stories about working with the Who and Hendrix. He'd produced the first 8 Rush albums. We were more of a spontaneous band, and I liked that, recording live and getting more of that spontaneity going. Some of our early cassettes had that feel, and then when we got with Terry Brown, he was very regimented in the way he wanted to do things, and we had to follow his way. So I personally thought he was a great guy, but just didn't like his style of working, and it didn't end well. I remember we weren't happy with some mixes, and he basically told us to fuck off and that it was his way, and see you later.
Blimey. But how did you followed this up though with a second album, which was in sort of 94, wasn't it? So
right.
This was the height of grunge, really, wasn't it? So right. Yes, and you're on Polydor. So did you get an advance at this point? Had you signed a contract?
Yeah, we were, Smash was having some problems, and then we were moved to Island Records, and we had a new manager at that time, and he was like, well, I want to shop you guys to a different label. And so we didn't go with Island, and then this manager then quit. So we were really done. We thought, well, that's the end. We're not going to do any more. And then we started to get calls from Europe, and it was this guy named Oli Bergfleth at a label called Dream Circle, and they're a German label. And he was like, I just love your music. How much would it cost to make a second album? And we gave him an amount which wasn't super expensive. I think it was like maybe $25,000. We had spent over $100,000 recording M is for Millions, because it's a whole different league when you're in the major labels. You're working at expensive studios, when we recorded M is for Millions, like Bruce Hornsby's down the hall recording at the same time. So it's just a lot more expensive and not necessarily better, but different. And then Ole gave us this advance and we recorded the album. And then he was like, I've got this artist named Sheryl Crow. Would you go on tour with her? And we said, sure. And then we went on tour with Sheryl Crow. So that's kind of the second album
This
story.
is Raquel. Is that how you pronounce it?
Raquel. Yeah.
Yeah. And were you pleased with this one? Was this a better experience, a better sound? Did it represent what the band?
I wasn't really happy with it. I think that we were trying to find different ways to work. I think you mentioned, like, how did you deal with the grunge scene? I think we incorporated that sound a little bit into that album. I think we were searching for something. So ultimately, I don't really like it. I think other members liked it better than M is for Millions, but I think they're fine albums now. I think at the time again, you just hope that you can do something you're happy with, but I was never really happy with either album.
No, but then you started to, well, yes, just briefly. And what was the touring with Sheryl Crow like at this stage in Europe? Was that a fun experience?
Oh, it was great. She was playing places like the Paradiso in Amsterdam, and I know Joy Division played there, and clubs probably anywhere from like 300 or 400 all the way up to like 2,000 to 3,000
Right.
seat places, and her band was really nice. They were like, you guys can use any of our equipment. She was really nice. The tour ended in Austria, in Vienna, and I remember getting in a food fight with Sheryl Crow. So we had a really fun time hanging out with her and touring. And as far as an opening band, like I remember in Berlin, we got like 2 or 3 encores, and we looked at Sheryl Crow like, what do we do? They want us to keep playing there, and she's like, just get out there and play, make it fast.
Yeah, absolutely. So then after that release, you start recording or rehearsing, demoing your third album. Do you then have a few member changes, lineup changes at this point?
Yeah, we had added a guitar player, Benjamin Kushner, as a second guitar player, and he went on the Sheryl Crow tour, and he also recorded Raquel with us, and he was a real positive influence on the band. We also had a different bass player at that time join the band, and we did start to record. We bought another 8-track and set up a studio in Greg's in his basement of his house and started record there. So
Yes. But then what happens during that process of your third album?
well, that is what happened is Lori became really unhealthy, meaning she started to have seizures, and we had experienced some of the seizures on the road, and they kept getting worse. She ended up getting a pacemaker, and we had a meeting, and this, like, Warner Brothers Records was coming from Los Angeles, and they said, "Oh, we'll be here in like 5 weeks to see you guys play," and basically said they were going to sign us. And we were like, well, we really got to get some demos done. We've got to start rehearsing. And Lori just said, I'm burned out. I don't want to do this anymore.
Oh, no. Is she okay now? Is she okay now?
Yeah, she's a lot better. Yeah, yes.
Well, that's good to know. So then what happens to you, second band down, and where do you go now, mid-90s for
Oh,
the...
yeah. A great question. So I remember we had played with the band Soul Asylum. Four Against It had them at the drumstick. We played. There were like 4 people at that show. So we watched Soul Asylum. They watched us. That sort of thing. And I remember I got a job as a van driver for the YWCA. So I'm driving young girls around from age 12 to 16 who are pregnant and taking them to special services. And then I look over at the big auditorium in town called Pershing Auditorium, and there's Soul Asylum playing. So, I'm in my little bus and trying to, figure out what I want to do. And then the music store that was real prominent in town, Dietz Music, one of the owners, Doug Fenton, said, "Well, I really want you to come and teach guitar." And I was like, "Teach guitar?" I'm like, I'm pretty much self-taught. I don't think people are going to want to learn millions or for against songs. And he was like, "No, just give it a shot." So I had one student. I started with one student, and 30 years later, I'm still teaching guitar. I have my own studio in my backyard, and I have it set up so students can record. I've got drums, amps. I have anywhere from 5 or 6 bands come over a week and rehearse at the studio, and I give them suggestions. I record, I produce, and play in the bands too. So that's another kind of fun thing for me, is not only do I teach guitar, but I really jam and play with a lot of the students, and it's really fun to see them actually. They did want to learn some four against songs and million songs, but also like the whole post-punk scene, that's really popular with a lot of my students too. So
My God, yes, the 80s has become very interesting, hasn't it? People have all started to sort of grip into it. And yes, there's a fascination with the independent charts. So then, do you then rejoin the band at some stage?
that's right. So then that's about the mid 90s, about 95, when I started to teach guitar lessons. And then my wife and I moved to Colorado, to Fort Collins, Colorado, so she could finish she could get her master's degree in nutrition. And then we were there for about 3 years. We moved back to Lincoln about 2003. And then I just called Jeff up and I said, "We should have a meeting. I feel like we should play again." And that was with Paul Englehart. We had the meeting. The meeting went pretty well. We started to rehearse, and it was just like old times when we recorded that 14 song cassette LP. And one thing I have to tell you, David, I may need to go get a cord for this phone. I didn't realize the battery is pretty low. Do you have like a minute here while I can
Yes,
run and get the
I'll just
cord?
hit pause. I'll just hit pause. So we're just on how you sort of then sort of come back into the band, don't you? So yes, just so so this is quite an interesting sort of new chapter, isn't it? Were you surprised to be back in
Right.
the band?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was just like when we started. We talked about bands. We were into music and kind of what we wanted to do as a band, and then started to get together and rehearse right away over at Paul's house, and then really just crank out the songs again. And there wasn't any trouble in writing. We kind of, had maybe gained more skill as players or whatever, but would come up with ideas and jam on the ideas, or write them on the spot, or come in with finished songs. So it was really a creative time. In fact, I think it was one of the more creative times in my life as far as being in a band, is that period working with Paul and Jeff again.
Right.
I never worked with Paul. And I never worked with Paul, but he was really enthusiastic and really a good drummer, and was very instrumental in inspiring us, saying, "Oh, that sounds good. Keep doing that or repeat that." So, like, the three of us worked really well.
Yes. So what was the next album that you recorded back within the band at this point?
So that would have been called Shade Side, Sunny Side. And that was like, Paul had a poster on his wall that was like from Mexico about bullfighting, and Jeff always just thought it was funny how it said Shade Side, Sunny Side. So he liked that statement, so that's why the album's called that.
Right. And the members who'd come into the band when you weren't there, had they left again? What was the state of the band
Well,
during that period?
yeah, I'm not sure of the date, but I think it was 97 or 98 was the last For Against album, even though it may not have come out until the 2000, the album coalesced. And that was Maeve, Stephen Hendricks, and then Paul, the drummer. And I believe at that time, Maeve had moved away to Virginia or something like that. So,
Right. So yes, that's
so he
quite
was already
Yes.
out of Lincoln. Yeah.
So it was Shade Side, Sunny Side was the next one.
Sunnyside.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. It's good. It's good. So then, yeah. So were you still keeping your side hustle, but then sort of found yourself with this, sort of four against Mark III, really, wasn't it, at this point? Because you'd had
Yeah.
Mark,
Yeah. Exactly. So
and
that's
you,
right. We like I was teaching like full-time guitar lessons. That's what I did. I also worked as a para at a school. My wife and I wanted to build a home or buy a home, and they didn't recognize guitar teaching as a legitimate job. So I had to get a job at a school, and then I got the house loan, and then I quit that and just went back to guitar teaching and playing in four against.
yes. And then for the first time with this band, you came to Europe. Did you tour with them
I
at
think we
this?
may have froze up. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I'm here. You sound okay.
Yeah, we oh good, good. Yeah, we went to Athens, Greece first and played a couple shows there. Then we went to Italy and did three shows, then Spain, and then we did a tour with a different drummer, Nick Buller, who we played Germany, France, Italy again. We played, different places. Went back to Athens, Greece, and did like I think it was like six different countries, and we did 12 shows in 12 days.
Blimey, that must have been exhausting. I would imagine the band has got a very good reputation, actually, because you've started to appear on different compilations, haven't you? Which has got that kind of,
Right.
you have that slightly sort of melancholic gothic vibe to you, which probably suits, suits a certain audience member.
Right, right. Well, we all, like a lot of different darker, especially Jeff was really into like experimental and dark music. And I think, from different influences, but we were surprised when we were at all the shows. We could tell we were at the right venue because there was a lot of people that were way into goth that were into four against, so which was
Yes.
cool.
So after those albums, you did Never Been, which was 2009 on Words on Music. What happens to you and also the band at this stage?
We played one more show. We played New York City and Brooklyn, and we that was for the Big Takeover magazine. And at that time, Jeff and I really weren't talking anymore. Kind of, just things go through cycles. He didn't really want to be around like the band that much. He was thinking about moving and doing something different. We're just kind of going through a different phase, and I'm not really sure why we weren't getting along. It just again kind of happened. I think I was with the band about almost 6 years before, and it was about 6 years again, about 2009. Maybe the last show was in 2011, and the last shows were pretty good. But then there were just some disagreements about things. I think maybe it, when you work together closely and you do all this in like songwriting and working together, then you need a break, and so we took a permanent one, I guess.
Yes. So musically, what have you been doing since then? I know you mentioned your sort of guitar teaching and rehearsal space.
Yeah.
So are you still sort of very active in the music scene?
Well, Jeff passed away last year, and that was really hard and a shock. And Jeff and I, communicated through email at the end of his life and had some really good back and forth emails, which is great. And then we were my band, the Cartoon Pupils, the original kind of like post-punk band that I was in high school, was asked to play a show, and our singer lives in Scotland, and he explained how he wasn't really wanting to do the show. He has different energy now that he's in his 60s and not 18. And, we understood, but the other three members wanted to play. So we asked Jon Fynbu, the singer of Four Against One, if he would play with us. And then he said yes. And we started to rehearse. I got one of my students to play bass because the original bass player Liz said she would do it, but then canceled and didn't. She lives in Washington D.C. Didn't come in for rehearsals, and was worried about COVID, that sort of thing. But we started to practice and it started to go well. And then our drummer Bruce, the original Cartoon Pupils drummer, moved to New York to get a job teaching biology, and we then hired a guy that had drummed for the Millions to play drums. And then we asked Maeve, the other guitar player of Four Against, if he would join. And he did. So we had Maeve on guitar, myself on guitar, Carl Steven, the bass player from the Cartoon Pupils, on bass on his Rickenbacker. And then we had Carrie Benish play bass, one of my students. So we had two bass guitars, and then John sang. And we worked up all the original, like, Four Against One songs and did a show recently for the Capital Punishment magazine, which was like a fanzine in Lincoln that kind of helped promote all the underground music that was going on in Lincoln in the early 80s.
Fantastic.
And that was a fun show. We played a local bar, and we all got along great. And it was really fun to play with Maeve. Maeve and I had got together before and looked at guitars together or kind of gone over parts, but we never played in a band. And we really orchestrated our guitar parts well. And I felt that it was a cool sound, and the audience seemed to like it a lot. We've been asked to play again. I'm not sure if we will. Everybody's kind of spread out. John lives in Wisconsin, and Maeve lives on the East Coast, so we'll see what happens. I also play with some of my students. I have a band called Tolerating Bob. You can find some of our songs on Spotify, and we hope to play again. Right now, Bruce, the drummer, is living in New York, and the singer's living in Texas, but we're plan on coming back to Lincoln, everybody, and maybe play some more songs. But I like what we're recording and what we've done, so that's kind of what I've been up to.
Because was Maeve in
And
a
then,
band?
of course, go ahead.
I was going to say, was Maeve in a band called the Gladstones?
That's correct. The Gladstones, that was Bruce Steven, the original drummer of the Cartoon Pupils, and his brother Carl, the bass player of the Cartoon Pupils, and Maeve. And then they had some different singers. I believe John Baker was the singer for the Gladstones.
Right.
They had another band, Playground, also.
Right, because I did an interview with Maeve many years ago because I love a song. Well, I love the album called Jeremy, and he does.
Yeah, it's a great album.
And there's a song called Garden, which I think is just absolutely amazing. And so when I did the interview with him, which was a long time ago, I had forgotten that he probably mentioned he had been in your band as well, Four Against. So yes, I hadn't realised all these connections, and then recently, so amazing.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it was really fun. I mean, Maeve was great. Jon Fynbu was great. My student was, so fun to play with, and was, learned all of Liz's bass parts. We really wanted Liz to come, but she just couldn't do it. And then Brandon McKenzie filled in for Bruce on drums. So it just all worked out really well, and had a great time. So maybe we'll do that again.
Well, yes, it sounds like with being in America compared to the UK, because of the distances involved, things just do change quite drastically. So there's a lot more bands that have to morph into another bands or morph into another completely different project with members who are still living locally or vaguely locally in that district, whereas in this country, it's a much smaller place, isn't it? So when someone just goes off to the East Coast or West Coast,
right.
There is no chance of them just popping back at the weekends for a quick rehearsal, is there, sometimes? It's a tricky one.
I know John was very dedicated. I think he would drive like 12 hours, leave at 4 in the morning to make rehearsals. So, the singer, Jon Fynbu. So that was great.
That was very committed. So, have you managed to archive most of the material for the band? I know you've got this new potential release coming out of the very first album, but have you managed to sort of capture everything else that you've done and got it kind of nicely compiled?
No. We're working on that. I know Sean Applegate, Jeff's husband, I was over at the house and uh, we were just looking at some master tapes and whatnot. So there's a lot to go through and like you said, archive and maybe get it digitized. And, I've told Words on Music, Eric Ostermeyer and Mark, his brother, about all these cassettes and reel to reel. So we're gonna start with that 14 song cassette LP first, and then kind of see what we can dig up from there and work on. So
God, that's fantastic. Well, that will hopefully be next year's project, won't it? Which will be nice. Um,
yeah.
that would be very good. And any other kind of musical projects or live shows that you've got lined coming up soon, potentially?
No, not really. I just did an art show. Like I mentioned, that I studied art at Nebraska Wesleyan University, and I hadn't done an art show in about 25 years. So I turned my music studio in the backyard into an art gallery, and it was a really fun show. But I had 21 paintings in that show, and about 100 people showed up, and it was a really good time. And we could sit around and talk about art, and just a lot of old friends from old neighborhoods and things like that. So it was a fun time. So
Yeah.
that's
So
what I'm working on.
have you always been a artist, painter?
Yeah, I really, music is something I did for fun and never really thought that I'd do anything with it. But then music kind of took over at certain points. So from an early age, I've always been drawing and painting, and always thought I would be an artist. And then music was for fun. So
Yes, my God. And what sort of, I mean, I've seen some of your work. Would you call it, I don't know, post-impressionist? Is it sort of based on influences? What are your main influences as artist that you're particularly drawn to?
yeah, well, I mentioned that Elton John album, Yellow Brick Road. That was one of the first influences. And then I think, just growing up, going to Sheldon Art Gallery, I remember having a real um, clear memory of go painting I saw there. And I just like different impressionist artists, so, and then I think that Peter Saville, is that how you pronounce his name?
Oh,
Of
yes.
Factory. I just love all the Factory records. I mean, just for pieces of artwork and how minimal they were and how direct, and the colors were always just right. And I mean, those are some of the best record sleeves I've ever seen. So that definitely had an influence on me.
Yes, I mean, so is that so 2026, you've got sort of musical projects and your sort of art as well as teaching and studio space?
Right. And so for 2026, I'll probably have another art show in the spring. And then I'll get my studio bands, the students, to play a show. We usually go to like a local brewery or an outdoor show. I've even had shows at my house. And then some people have contacted me, with other types of performing arts type of things. Someone said they were into stand-up comedy and could they perform at one of my shows. So in the students ages range from being like 10-year-olds all the way up to 60s and 70s. So I've got a wide variety of people that want to play. And one of the things about my studio, like what I originally talked about, was how I like to have people write and record their original songs, and of course perform them too, whatever that is. So rather than play a cover, it's great to play a few covers here and there, but mostly focusing on their own original creativity. So
God, that's fantastic. Well, look, thank you ever so much for all this. This has been great, and thank you, oh yes, for sort of being able to sort of switch days and not particularly times, but yes,
Oh yeah, yeah. So is your dad doing better?
yes, he is. He's got to that age where he can get a bit stumbly because he's hurt his Achilles, and that's not very strong.
Oh yeah.
So that's not brilliant. And then he hit his elbow, which kind of was really painful. So he went to the hospital, A&E, in fact, and they X-rayed it and they took some, tests and stuff, and it's found out to be gout. So he's got some gout tablets that he's
Oh
taking.
yeah, yeah.
So I think that was
So
just very painful.
how old is your dad? How old?
93,
Oh,
93.
great. That's great. Well, yeah, my dad passed away last year, and he was 89. I felt really bad, but it's like I'm continuing to do the music and the art, and that's what he always was really into and supporting me and doing. Most parents don't buy you guitars and music. I remember my dad for Christmas even bought me the metal box by PIL. That I mean, that's a pretty cool dad that gets in the metal box
Well, that's
for
very cool.
Christmas.
Yes, that's amazing.
But
Yeah.
and then so then in London, where do you live? What part of London?
Oh, well,
I'm
actually,
curious.
it's a place called Norwich, which is kind of 100 miles north of London towards the coast.
Okay.
That's towards the European, continent landscape.
Oh
So,
wow. So is it a bit colder there?
no, it's because of it's quite mild in a way. It's not cold
Oh wow.
like it used to be in the sort of my generation, 70s and 80s and 90s. And obviously previously cold winters were really harsh, but now it's kind of very manageable basically.
Well, that's great. Yeah. Nebraska is, when I grew up, there used to be snow drifts, 3 feet high, and you had to have a little, like, everyone had to plow their sidewalk so the kids could walk to school. And now we just don't get the snow like we used to. It's just a lot more mild. We get a lot of harsh weather, a lot more wind. We've had just terrible wind lately, which, blows tree limbs down and wrecks
Yeah.
houses and stuff. But
We can get a lot
it's,
of rain. We can get quite a lot of torrential rain, which was, like can make quite a mess and a bit of a sort of not disaster, but it can just sort of make a lot of places get quite flooded. But it swings and roundabouts. So, yeah, last year we had a lot of hurricane winds that were coming from America. You'd hear
wow.
these names, and it was like, okay, it's coming, it's coming. So normally it comes to the west, and then by the time it comes to us, we get a bit of it, but we don't get a lot of it. But obviously, there was, I think it was last year, it was just endless hurricanes coming from America, wasn't there?
Oh wow. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, totally. And then we had smoke from Canada too. The boundary waters were burning, and they
Yes.
can't really put out these fires because there's so much deadwood. We go up to northern Minnesota. We have a family cabin up there. We're about 2 hours from the Canadian border, and it's like paradise. Our lake is clear. There aren't any resorts. There's not many people. It's a great place to get away. Now we have all this smoke every year, and it blots out the sun and you're not supposed to go outside. Well, we have a 100-year-old cabin, so it doesn't filter things very well. So that's part of the world we live in, I guess.
Yes, it is quite tricky, isn't it, really? I mean, you do your best and that's all you can do, really, isn't it? But
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So that was yeah,
Well,
well,
thanks.
look, yes, thank you. I mean, it's been amazing, and apart from one little glitch there, it's been
Yeah.
particularly good. So hurrah for the internet. That's what we say.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, exactly. Well, it's really good talking, David. If you have any more questions or whatever, just reach out, and
yeah.
happy to talk again, and look forward to the next time.
Yes, merry midwinter. It's the longest day, shortest night. No, longest night, shortest day very soon. So, and that will be,
December 21st, I think.
yeah, around that 21st, 22nd. But anyway, any of those days, it's going to be pretty dark. So,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's dark here.
and do people, oh, by the way, have people started trimming up and putting Christmas trees and fairy lights?
Oh, yeah. We just got ours up today.
Right. And do you go for a real tree and lots of fairy lights?
We used to. We used to, meaning that we had one. My daughter Alice, it's her birthday today, like I mentioned. She was like, I want this particular one. And, I had to wade through like 30 trees. And she's like, heave ho, daddy. You can do it. And we get this tree home and we notice the trunk is a little curled, and we set it up anyway. Well, we're down in the basement one day. We hear this huge crash, and oh my God, trees falling over, water's coming into our basement. So we go with the fake tree now.
Actually, we had a slightly similar experience where we used to like the real tree and we'd sort of keep it alive,
Oh, yeah.
bring it in every year. And then one year there was all these bark beetles appearing, all these little things
Yeah.
came out of it, and we suddenly started looking a bit concerned. So we tried to tidy it up and thought that was okay. And then it just kept, they just kept appearing. So we went, okay, from now on, it's the fake tree, because yes.
Yeah, and I love the smell of the real ones. We do a lot of wood burning, so we have a stove upstairs that heats our house, and then we have a wood burning sauna in the backyard, and so we love the wood. We've got 4 big oak trees, but with the tree, and we've got 3 dogs, so then they like to get involved and yank on the tree. One year we had puppies and they were climbing up the tree. So the
Right.
fake ones are just more bulletproof. So but
Yes.
all our lights went out this year, so we had to go buy more new lights, and then we didn't like the colors, so we had to take those back. It's a process.
Yes, I know. We try, initially you try and have it quite ambitious, and then you think, let's just keep it quite simple and quite
Yeah, yeah.
tidy. But yes, anyway, look, thank you. Have a lovely day. And yes, I hope your daughter has a really nice 16th and drives carefully. That's the main thing.
Well, thanks, David. It's great talking.
See you
Have a
later.
good
Take
one.
care. Yeah, keep in touch. Bye. Bye.
Will do.
And that, dear listener, is the end of the interview. A massive thank you to Harry for giving me the time for that. Very much appreciated. This has been the C86 show. David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites. Just do C86 show. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Have a great week. Stay safe.